The meeting room aboard the Xylaran starship was bright, sleek, and filled with a strange hum. Dr. Mark sat in a comfortable but unfamiliar chair, feeling both excited and nervous. It wasn't every day that humanity got to sit across from an alien species for peaceful talks. Across the table sat Ambassador Vix, a tall, silver-skinned Xylaran with 4 luminous eyes. Like all Xylarans, Vix had no mouth. Instead, they communicated through sound waves directly into the mind. Their long fingers tapped the smooth surface of the table as they spoke telepathically. "Your species is fascinating, Dr. Mark," Vix said. "Your intelligence, adaptability, and creativity are most impressive. We have learned much from these discussions." Mark smiled. "The feeling is mutual. Xylaran technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. Your ability to communicate without speech is incredible." Vix's large eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of approval. "Now we must discuss the final topic of biological exchange. Understanding each other's reproduction will allow for deeper cooperation between our species." Mark paused. He hadn't expected this topic so soon. "Oh, well, sure, that's important." Vix tilted their head. "Indeed, we Xylarans reproduce through thought-based mitosis. When one of us reaches a certain stage of intellectual growth, we split into 2 identical beings, each sharing the knowledge of the original. It is clean, efficient, and logical." Mark frowned. "Wait, so you just divide into 2? No parents, no childhood?" "Correct. We simply exist as we are, with full understanding of our purpose." Mark took a deep breath. "That's different from how humans do it." Vix leaned forward, curious. "Please explain." Mark hesitated. How was he supposed to summarize human reproduction to an alien species that had never heard of parents, children, or families? He decided to keep it simple. "Well, humans need 2 people, 1 male, 1 female, to create a new human. The process involves physical contact, and over time, the new human grows inside the female until it is ready to be born." For the first time since the meeting started, Vix froze. Their glowing eyes widened. "Inside?" Mark nodded. "Yes. The baby grows inside the mother for months before it's born." The Xylaran ambassador didn't move for a long moment. The hum in the room seemed louder. "This is deeply unsettling." Vix's voice trembled slightly. "You are telling me that a living being grows inside another, and then it emerges?" "Yes," Mark confirmed. "And after birth, human parents care for the child for many years, teaching them everything they need to know." Vix's hands twitched. "Years?" "Yes. Human children take time to grow and learn. It's a slow process, but it helps us form deep emotional bonds." Vix's eyes flickered rapidly, a sign of distress. "You are telling me that your kind willingly endures this burden. You allow another being to live inside you. You invest years into raising it." Mark rubbed the back of his neck. Yes. That's normal for us." Vix turned to their assistant, who was equally stunned. They exchanged rapid mental signals. Finally, Vix turned back to Mark. "Your species is terrifying." Mark blinked. "What?" "You undergo physical transformation just to continue your species. You dedicate your time, energy, and resources to raising young ones. This is inefficient, dangerous, illogical." Vix shuddered. "And yet you do it willingly." Mark smiled. "Not just willingly. It's one of the most important things we do. Our families give us meaning." Vix was silent. Finally, they whispered, "We have much to discuss." The meeting room remained silent. The soft hum of the Xylaran starship filled the space, but neither Dr. Mark nor Ambassador Vix spoke. The alien's 4 glowing eyes stared at Mark, unblinking, processing everything he had just said. Finally, Vix broke the silence. "Dr. Mark, I must confirm, you are serious." Mark nodded. "Yes, That is exactly how humans reproduce. Vix's hands twitched. This is deeply unsettling. You are telling me that two humans must physically interact to create new life. Mark sighed. Yes, that's how it works. Vix's assistant, a smaller Accelerant named Zill, chimed in. Ambassador, if I may. This is truly inefficient. Why would a species evolve in such a way? Mark smiled. It might seem inefficient to you, but it works well for us. Our way of reproduction is not just about creating new life. It's about forming connections. Vix tilted their head. Connections. Yes, Mark said. When humans reproduce, they don't just create a child and leave it to survive alone. Parents care for their children. They teach them, love them, and protect them for years. Vix leaned back, trying to understand. And this is necessary. Absolutely. A human baby cannot survive alone. It needs constant care and attention. The Xylaran ambassador blinked all four eyes in sequence. Your species willingly takes on this burden. Mark chuckled. Not just willingly. For most humans, it's one of the greatest joys in life. Vix made a strange, clicking sound, which Mark assumed was a sign of confusion. Dr. Mark, let me clarify something. When a new Xylaran is formed, they already have knowledge. They are ready to contribute to society immediately. You are saying that human newborns know nothing. That's right, Mark confirmed. They have to learn everything. How to walk, how to talk, how to think. Vix's glowing eyes flickered. This is incredibly inefficient. Mark laughed. Maybe, but it has advantages. Vix stared at him. What advantages could this possibly have? Mark leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. Because we grow up needing guidance, we form deep emotional bonds with those around us. We develop love, trust, and a sense of responsibility. That's what makes us different from other species. We care for each other. Vix remained silent, absorbing this information. Zill, the assistant, spoke again. But wouldn't it be better if your young ones simply knew everything at birth? Mark shook his head. Not necessarily. Learning from experience makes us adaptable. We can change, grow, and innovate. If we were born knowing everything, we wouldn't be able to discover new things. We wouldn't question, explore, or improve. Vix tapped the table thoughtfully. So you are saying that your species thrives because of its emotional connections? Exactly, Mark said. Our ability to bond with each other makes us stronger. Parents sacrifice for their children. Families work together. Entire civilizations are built on these connections. Vix's expression remained unreadable, but something in their body language shifted. Xylarans do not experience family the way humans do, they admitted. When we divide, we do not remain attached to our other half. We simply go our separate ways, existing as individuals. Mark smiled. That's the difference between us. Humans aren't just individuals. We are part of something bigger, our families, our communities, our species. Vix was silent for a long time. Finally, they spoke in a quiet voice. I do not understand this, but I wish to. Mark's smile widened. Then let's keep talking. The meeting room remained silent, except for the soft hum of the Xylaran starship. Ambassador Vix had not moved for several minutes. Their four glowing eyes stared at Dr. Mark, as if trying to make sense of something completely unnatural. Their assistant, Zill, finally broke the silence. Ambassador, this information is deeply concerning. Vix slowly turned their head toward Zill. Yes, very concerning. Dr. Mark sighed, already expecting this reaction. I understand that human reproduction seems strange to you, but it's completely normal for us. Vix's glowing eyes flickered rapidly, a clear sign of distress. Dr. Mark, what you are describing is not just strange. It is utterly horrifying. Your species willingly endures great discomfort, pain, and emotional distress simply to create new life. And you accept this as natural. Mark nodded. Of course, the challenges of raising a child are worth it because of the love and connection we share. Zill made a strange vibrating sound, which Mark assumed was a form of alarm. Ambassador, we must report this to the High Council immediately. This level of biological inefficiency is dangerous. Vix lifted a hand to stop Zill. Not yet. I must understand more. Mark leaned forward. Look, I get it. To you, our way seems inefficient, but you're only looking at it from a logical perspective. Humans are not just logical creatures. We are emotional beings too. That's what makes us different. Vix tilted their head. Explain. Mark smiled. Our emotions, love, joy, even sadness, are what drive us to protect and care for each other. Families are not just about reproduction. They are about forming unbreakable bonds. A human child is helpless, but because of that, parents develop a deep attachment. This attachment makes them willing to sacrifice anything for their child's survival. Vix tapped their fingers against the table, deep in thought. Xylarans do not experience such bonds. When we divide, our new form carries the knowledge of the original, but there is no emotional connection. We separate and go our own way. Zill nodded. That is why we have advanced so quickly. No distractions, no attachments, only progress. Mark shook his head. But progress without connection, doesn't that feel empty? Both Xylarans turned to look at him. Vix finally spoke. Dr. Mark, you are suggesting that your emotional bonds make you stronger. That is difficult to accept. Why? Mark asked. Vix's fingers twitched. Because emotions cloud judgment. They cause irrational behavior. They lead to conflict and suffering. Mark nodded. Yes, emotions can cause problems, but they also bring meaning to life. Think about it. Humans don't just work for survival. We work for our families, our friends, our dreams. Without emotions, would we have great art, music, or literature? Would we fight to protect each other? Would we sacrifice for the future? Vix was silent. Zill, however, looked uncomfortable. Ambassador, this is dangerous thinking. If emotions are as powerful as he claims, then, they hesitated. Then perhaps we are missing something. Vix turned back to Mark. You believe emotions are an advantage. Mark nodded. Absolutely. They make us adaptable, creative, and strong. They push us to go beyond logic, to take risks, to fight for what matters. Vix leaned back in their chair, deep in thought. Finally, they spoke in a quiet voice. This must be studied further. Mark smiled. Then let's continue the discussion. Ambassador Vix sat motionless, their 4 glowing eyes flickering in deep thought. Across the table, Dr. Mark watched them carefully. He could tell that the Xylaran was struggling to process everything. Finally, Vix spoke. Dr. Mark, you claim that emotions, specifically the bonds between your kind, make you stronger. I find this difficult to accept. Mark leaned forward. Why? Vix's fingers tapped the smooth surface of the table. As I have said, emotions cloud judgment. They create unnecessary complications. Xylarans are efficient because we focus on logic and reason. We do not let attachments distract us from progress. Mark nodded, understanding their perspective. I get it. From a purely logical point of view, emotions seem unnecessary. But let me ask you something. Why did your species seek out humanity in the first place? Vix tilted their head slightly. To expand our knowledge, to improve ourselves. Mark smiled. Exactly. You value progress. You study other species to learn from them. But have you ever asked yourself why humans have progressed so much despite being physically weaker than many species? Vix was silent. Mark continued. It's because of our connections. We don't just pass on knowledge through genetics. We teach, we support, and we inspire each other. A human child is born knowing nothing, but with the guidance of parents, teachers, and society, they grow into something greater. Vix's assistant, Zill, finally spoke. But wouldn't it be more efficient to simply transfer knowledge instantly, like we do? If information is what makes one strong, why go through the trouble of years of learning? Mark shook his head. Because experience is just as important as knowledge. Learning something by doing it, struggling with it, and overcoming challenges makes us adaptable. It makes us creative. If we only relied on stored information, we wouldn't be able to grow beyond what we already know. Vix's fingers twitched. You are suggesting that struggle itself is valuable. Yes, Mark said firmly. Struggle builds resilience, and our emotional bonds make that struggle worthwhile. Parents work hard not just for themselves, but for their children. Friends support each other through difficulties. Entire civilizations are built on cooperation, not just individual knowledge. Vix's eyes flickered again, a clear sign of inner conflict. I do not understand this completely, but I see that you believe it strongly. Mark chuckled. I do. And I think deep down, you're starting to see it too. Vix remained silent for a long time. Finally, they spoke in a softer tone. Perhaps there is something here worth exploring. But if your emotional bonds are so powerful, why do they also lead to conflict? Mark sighed. Because emotions are complicated. Love and loyalty bring people together, but fear and anger can drive them apart. That's why humans aren't perfect. But our greatest achievements come when we choose connection over division. Zill crossed their arms. This is a dangerous idea, Ambassador. If emotions make humans strong, does that mean we are weaker? Vix didn't answer right away. Instead, they stared at Mark, deep in thought. Then, in a quiet voice, they said, I am beginning to wonder the same thing. Mark smiled. Then maybe it's time for Tylerans to ask themselves a new question. What if logic alone isn't enough? Vix did not respond, but for the first time, they looked uncertain. And that, Mark thought, was the first step toward real understanding. The meeting room remained still. A strange tension filled the air as Ambassador Vix stared at Dr. Mark. Their 4 glowing eyes flickered in an unusual pattern, perhaps a sign of deep thought, or maybe even doubt. Zill, the Xylaran assistant, finally broke the silence. Ambassador, this discussion is moving into dangerous territory. If emotions truly make humans strong, what does that say about us? Vix did not answer immediately. Instead, they turned to Mark. Dr. Mark, let me ask you something. If your emotions are so powerful, why do humans still suffer? Why do you fight among yourselves? Mark sighed. Because emotions aren't perfect. They make us strong, but they also make us unpredictable. Fear, anger, and jealousy can lead to conflict, but at the same time, love, hope, and compassion drive us to fix our mistakes. That's what makes humans different. We struggle, but we grow. Vix's fingers tapped against the table as they processed this. Xylarans do not experience such things. We operate on logic and reason alone. Our kind does not suffer emotional pain, nor do we waste time on unnecessary attachments. Mark smiled. But do you ever feel happiness? Do you feel joy when you make a great discovery? Do you ever experience the thrill of something new? Vix hesitated. We understand satisfaction. When we accomplish something important, we recognize it as success. Mark shook his head. That's different. Satisfaction is logical, but joy, that's emotional. It's what makes life worth living. Zill crossed their arms. That is inefficient. Your kind wastes energy on feelings. Mark chuckled. Maybe, but that wasted energy is what pushes us forward. Think about it. Humans don't just work for survival. We create art, music, stories. We dream of exploring the stars, not because we have to, but because we want to. Vix leaned forward slightly. You are saying that your species is driven by desire. Exactly, Mark said. Desire for something greater. We dream of things beyond what we already know. And because of that, we keep advancing. Vix was silent for a long moment. Then, in a quiet voice, they asked, "Are we missing something?" Zill's head snapped toward the ambassador. "Ambassador, you cannot be considering this." Vix raised a hand, signaling silence. "I am not making conclusions, Zill. I am questioning." Mark smiled. "That's a good start." For the first time, Vix looked uncertain. Perhaps for the first time in Sci-Fi history, logic alone was not enough. The air in the meeting room felt heavier now, as if something important was shifting. Ambassador Vix's 4 glowing eyes flickered with uncertainty. Their logical mind struggled against something unfamiliar, doubt. Dr. Mark could see it. He leaned forward slightly and said, "It's not a weakness to question things, Ambassador. It's how we grow." Vix remained silent for a long moment, then finally spoke. "Dr. Mark, I must admit something. I have never questioned my purpose before." Mark nodded. "I understand. Your species is built on logic and efficiency. Questioning something as fundamental as your way of life must be uncomfortable." Zill, that Sci-Fi assistant, stiffened. "Ambassador, you cannot allow this to influence you. Logic has guided our kind for millennia. We have conquered challenges without the need for emotions." Mark glanced at Zill, but kept his focus on Vix. "But is survival enough? Is knowledge enough? Or do you ever wonder if there's something more?" Vix's fingers twitched on the table. "You speak as if life must have a greater purpose." Mark smiled. "That's what makes humans different. We don't just exist. We search for meaning. We build families, friendships, and societies. We create stories and music, not because we have to, but because it makes life worth living." Vix tilted their head. "Zillarans do not ask such questions. We exist to expand knowledge and ensure survival. That is enough for us." Mark leaned back. "But what if it isn't? What if you're missing out on something greater?" Zill let out a sharp clicking sound. "This is dangerous thinking. You are suggesting that our way is incomplete." Vix did not respond immediately. Instead, they stared at Mark, deep in thought. Finally, they said, "Perhaps it is." Zill recoiled. "Ambassador." Vix held up a hand. "Calm yourself, Zill. We are here to learn. And I am beginning to understand something new." Asterisk, asterisk. Mark's smile grew. "That's how it starts. Understanding leads to growth." Vix was silent for a moment before speaking softly. "Dr. Mark, I wish to know more." And for the first time, a Sci-Fi had begun to question their purpose. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the Sci-Fi starship. Ambassador Vix sat still, their 4 glowing eyes flickering in deep thought. Across the table, Dr. Mark watched them carefully. He could tell something inside Vix was changing. Zill, the Sci-Fi assistant, looked tense. "Ambassador, I strongly advise against this line of thought. Doubt leads to instability. Instability leads to weakness." Vix turned their head slightly. "Or perhaps doubt leads to discovery." Zill recoiled slightly. "Discovery should be based on logic and knowledge, not emotion." Mark decided to speak. "Discovery often starts with a question. And sometimes that question challenges everything we thought we knew." Vix studied him. "You truly believe emotions make your species stronger?" Mark nodded. "Without a doubt. Emotions connect us. They give us purpose. They make us fight for each other, protect each other, and dream of something greater." Vix tapped their fingers on the table, a sign of deep contemplation. "Tillarans do not fight for each other. We do not form bonds like you do. We exist to serve progress, nothing more." Mark leaned forward. "But doesn't that feel empty?" Vix hesitated. It was the first time they had truly considered the question. Zill interrupted. "Ambassador, you cannot allow this human's ideas to infect our way of thinking. If emotions are so beneficial, then why do humans suffer from them? Why do they create war, pain, and division?" Mark sighed. Because emotions are powerful. And like any powerful force, they can be used for good or bad. But despite our flaws, we keep moving forward. We learn from our mistakes. We grow stronger because of them. Vix looked at him carefully. And you believe our kind could benefit from this growth? Mark nodded. I do. I think emotions are the missing piece in your civilization. You have logic, knowledge, and efficiency. But what if you had something more? What if you had the ability to truly care, to form connections, to experience joy? Vix remained silent for a long moment. Then, in a quiet voice, they said, I do not know what joy feels like. For the first time, Dr. Mark saw something in that Silaran's expression that looked almost like longing. And that, he realized, was the beginning of something new. The silence in the Silaran starship was heavier than before. Ambassador Vix sat motionless, their glowing eyes dimmed slightly as they processed everything Dr. Mark had said. For the first time in their existence, they felt something unfamiliar, curiosity, hesitation, and something else they couldn't name. Zil, their assistant, was visibly disturbed. Ambassador, this discussion has gone too far. We are Silarans. We do not require emotions. We function efficiently because we are free from such distractions. Vix did not respond immediately. Their fingers tapped lightly on the surface of the table, a habit Mark had started to recognize as a sign of deep thought. Finally, Vix spoke. Dr. Mark, tell me, how do humans experience joy? Mark smiled at the question. Joy can come in many ways. Sometimes it's through small things. Laughter, music, a good meal. Other times, it's through something greater. Achieving a goal, helping others, or being with those you care about. Vix tilted their head. Being with others. But why would their presence create joy? If one has knowledge and purpose, is that not enough? Mark shook his head. No. Knowledge and purpose give direction, but emotions give meaning. Imagine having all the knowledge in the universe, but no one to share it with. Would that not feel lonely? Vix's fingers froze mid-tap. Lonely. The word was strange to them, yet something about it felt unsettling. Zil scoffed. Xilarans do not experience loneliness. We are a collective. We do not need unnecessary attachments. Mark turned to Zil. Then why are you so afraid of this conversation? Zil stiffened. I am not afraid. Mark's gaze was steady. Aren't you? If emotions are truly useless, then this discussion shouldn't bother you. But it does, doesn't it? Zil clenched their hands. It is dangerous. Vix studied their assistant carefully before turning back to Mark. You believe emotions are not a weakness, but a strength. Mark nodded. Yes, they push us beyond survival. They make us protect, create, explore, and dream. Without them, we wouldn't have come this far. Vix remained silent for a long time. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, they said, I wish to understand more. For the first time, Silaran had expressed desire. And that Mark knew was the first step towards something new. The atmosphere in the Silaran starship was different now. Something unseen had shifted. Ambassador Vix, once a firm believer in pure logic, sat in deep thought. Their 4 glowing eyes flickered slowly, processing emotions they had never considered before. Dr. Mark observed quietly. He knew this was a critical moment. Vix was standing at the edge of something new, something that could change their entire species. Zil, however, was not ready to accept it. Their voice was sharp. Ambassador, we have wasted enough time. This discussion is dangerous. Emotions are an obstacle. If we continue down this path, it could weaken us. Vix turned to their assistant, their expression unreadable. Or, it could make us stronger. Zil recoiled. Stronger? How can something so illogical make us strong? Mark leaned forward. Because emotions connect us. They push us to go beyond simple survival. Without them, we would be nothing more than machines, just existing. Vix studied Mark closely. You truly believe this? Mark nodded. With all my heart. For a moment, Vix remained silent. Then, slowly, they placed a hand on their chest, right where a human's heart would be. What does it feel like? Mark smiled. It feels alive. Vix's fingers twitched slightly. I wish to experience it. Zill's eyes widened in shock. Ambassador, you cannot mean that. But Vix did not look at their assistant. Their gaze remained fixed on Mark. Tell me, Dr. Mark, where do I begin? Mark's smile grew. You already have. At that moment, for the first time in Sci-Fi history, something beyond logic, something beyond knowledge, had awakened, and nothing would ever be the same again. This final part concludes the transformation of Vix, showing how they have taken their first step toward understanding emotions. Let me know if you want any changes.